Hello and welcome to a look at A Dragon Strike for the Amiga, a game that was made by Westwood and released by SSI and revolves around the conflict known as the War of the Lands in the Dungeons and Dragons Krynn game world setting. When it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, at least back then, the predominant area used was Forgotten Realms. But Krynn was also used. SSI released the full series, the Krynn series of gold box games. And the main difference between Krynn and Forgotten Realms is the fact that dragons are not entirely uncommon in Krynn. They're not super common, but they are definitely much more prevalent than they would be in Forgotten Realms. And fittingly, in this game, you play the role as a dragon rider who belongs to one of three knightly orders. For those who may be familiar with Krynn, the Knights of Solnavnia, I think it's called, have multiple orders, and from the lowest order to the highest order, that would be Crown, Sword, and Rose. And depending on which order you belong to, you will be flying bronze, silver, or gold dragons. Now, for those who may not be familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, when it comes to dragons, good dragons are metallic dragons and evil dragons are colored dragons. And if we look at the strength of the different dragons, rough strength, I would say, metallic dragons, that would be copper, bronze, silver, and gold. And for the evil dragons, that would be white, black, green, blue, and red. You can argue that black and green are probably roughly the same threat level, but that is roughly the order of the different order of strength of the different dragons. One-to-one, the metallic dragons or the good dragons are slightly stronger than the evil dragons, but there are far more evil dragons than good dragons, so it sort of evens out in that regard. You play the role of the dragon rider mentioned earlier, and you fly around on your dragon of whatever kind it might be, completing various different missions in a very flight simulator-esque setting. I'll get back to that in a moment. As you play the game and complete missions, you will be given a chance to achieve a promotion to a higher knightly order, and it's entirely up to you whether you want to join the higher order or not. You will be asked once, and if you say no, you will never be asked again. Which of course means that if you say no to joining the Knights of the Sword, then you will not be given the option to join Knights of the Rose, because it requires that you are part of the Knights of the Sword in order to join them. But it is recommended by the game itself that you try all three knightly orders, because there's a minor difference in their missions and the story outcome. Not outcome, I would assume that's fixed, but the story is slightly different depending on the different orders. Let us get the technical stuff out of the way, graphics, sound, that kind of stuff. From a graphical point of view, the still images are drawn are decent. Some of them are quite nice looking and some of them are a bit more plain, but by and large I'm not entirely unhappy with the still images. They set up a setting that's appropriately epic for the game world, and you can easily draw an association between the different things being told in the story and what is being shown on screen. The main game engine, let's call it that, just to be fancy, is of course a 3D kind of experience, with certain objects being 3D and other objects being sprites, which is mainly anything that you fight, whether it's dragons, manticores, wyverns, whatever you call them. And I'm not one for believing that the sprites necessarily work particularly well in many 3D games, and in the case of this game, I definitely feel that they are a bit lacking. When it comes to the sound, the main music is appropriate for the game. I don't think it's particularly bad, but I don't think it's particularly memorable either. So I can take it or leave it. I'm not particularly fussed either way. The sound effects are somewhat decent, but they're also a bit coarse. So yeah, and the sound is average, decidedly average. But of course, the gameplay, which is the most important aspect of any game, um, the controls will factor into gameplay, so I deliberately did not mention them as a separate thing. But looking at the graphics, you can probably gather that we're talking as sort of a simulator, but not quite kind of thing going on. And it is, to me, it feels like someone decided that they wanted to do a game that was part of the simulator and part action, and in doing so, failed flat on both fronts. One of the main reasons I got an Amiga back in the day was the fact that I could play simulators on it. Simulators were present on the Commodore 64, and some of them were very enjoyable, and some of them were very lacking. And not all simulators on the Amiga were of the best quality. That would be a blatant lie, but that was one of the predominant factors for me initially getting an Amiga, playing games like flight simulators, strategy games, that kind of stuff, which were possible on the Commodore 64, but by and large, it was often a struggle. So I've played quite a few flight simulators and other types of simulators over the years, and I wouldn't say I'm a veteran, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in the field, but I have a certain experience. And when I take that experience into consideration, the simulator part of this game is very, very bare boned. It does exactly what it needs to do, but absolutely nothing more. Your dragon has a breath that it can fire off in the distance, and good luck trying to hit anything. It's unless you're at point blank range, it can be very, very wonky to hit with it. And of course, it has quite a long recharge. I understand why the long recharge has been done the way it has, but at the same time, it also means that when you are fighting aerial opponents, you will be spending an awful lot of time chasing them because you have to be in melee range so you can smack them with your lance. And that, of course, means that once you start fighting multiple opponents at the same time, you quickly find yourself in what is coined as a turning war, where you are turning around an enemy, trying to turn around you, trying to get the advantage, and when you have other enemies firing their dragon's breath at you while you are engaged in trying to outturn an opponent that is close in, it becomes a bit of a messy affair. And dragons do not have afterburners, in case you're wondering. So you can't do kicks up turns and that kind of stuff. I know kickstop not the proper phrasing for it, but basically slamming the brakes, kicking in the afterburner after changing direction in order to change your direction very, very quickly, very, very suddenly. That is not necessarily something you have the option to do in this game. The action aspect, it's lacking. What can I say? It's sorely lacking because of the fact that you end up spending so much time trying to melee opposing dragons, meaning that you spend an awful lot of time chasing them, flying around in circles, trying to get the upper hand, and you basically just have to have a dragon in front of you, friendly or enemy, it doesn't matter. You can happily kill your own friendly dragons if they are foolish enough to fly in front of you, and you will take them out because, of course, you are a proper knight and you stab anything that moves, and it happens to be a silver dragon, well, tough, don't fly in front of me kind of thing. And it all takes an awful lot of excitement out of the excitement, meaning that the action access aspect of this game is quite lacking. If you have flown 3 or 4 missions in this game, you've probably experienced what the game has to offer, which is a bit of a shame. The semi-simulator part is advanced enough to be classified as a semi-simulator, but nothing more. So instead of having a simulator-esque game with some action elements, you have a boring simulator with some not very exciting action. And it detracts horribly from the gaming experience. And that is why the control comes in. Because, of course, a dragon is quite a large unit and is not necessarily something that can turn on a dime, meaning that you find yourself overcompensating constantly because you are trying to turn to get either in melee of an opponent or get your breath lined up so you can actually try and hit them. And it just feels very, very sluggish by and large. This game has a lot of promise, but unfortunately it fails to deliver on anything. The only reason you potentially would have to play this game is if you find the story remotely interesting, and if you don't, then you probably will have very little excitement out of this game because it becomes so incredibly samey after absolutely no time at all. Running it on a faster processor will probably speed it up to the point of becoming remotely more interesting, but in honesty, I don't really think so. You will be granted items when you rank up from time to time, and those items can be more or less useful, but most of them are passive bonuses, and it doesn't really feel like they are doing anything for you. You can't actually tell if they have an effect. They are described quite vividly as protecting you from blah blah blah, whatever, but it's very, very hard to notice that they are actually doing anything particular compared to not having them. So that excitement is not going to drive you to play this game either. A nice little touch, of course, is the fact that anyone who's familiar with Champions of Krynn will know that at one point during Champions of Krynn, you caused a flying citadel to crash. And that is also one of the missions that is available in this game, is to help making sure that flying citadel actually crashes. So this nice little connection between Champions of Krynn and this game, because of course both games take place at about the same time. I'm fairly sure this game starts slightly before the events of Champions of Krynn, but this game, a lot of promise, but it just fails to deliver, which is quite a shame. On that note, thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time. Bye bye for now.